The Houston Texans just quietly built one of the most dangerous rosters in the entire NFL, and most people are still sleeping on it. Think about what this team looked like 12 months ago. An offense that sputtered when it mattered most. An offensive line that was getting pushed around. A quarterback carrying too much weight with too little around him. And a fan base that had real questions about where this thing was heading. Now fast forward to right now, and the Texans have completely flipped the script on their offensive identity. Braden Smith walks in at right tackle, one of the most respected linemen in the league. Wyatt Teller takes over at left guard, bringing an edge and a nasty streak that this unit has been missing. Ed Ingram gets re-signed before free agency even gets loud, because this front office knew exactly what they had. David Montgomery replaces Nick Chubb in the backfield, and if you know anything about Montgomery, you know he does not just bring carries. He brings fire. He brings attitude. He brings the kind of energy that spills into a locker room and changes what a team believes about itself. That is not a small thing. That is actually everything. But here's what nobody is really talking about. This offseason was never just about adding players. It was about changing the personality of this offense from the ground up. Because when you pair that rebuilt line with the quarterback entering the most important season of his career, with weapons returning from injury, with a defense that finished number 1 in the entire NFL last season, you are not looking at a team trying to compete. You are looking at a team built to go all the way. The Houston Texans have all the pieces on paper. The roster is deeper. The attitude is different. The standard has been raised out loud by the people running this organization. And that brings us to the most important questions surrounding this entire team right now. Because all of this means nothing if the man taking every snap cannot put it all together when it counts. CJ Stroud is walking into 2026 with something he has never had before: a fully rebuilt offensive line, a fiery backfield, and a front office that is publicly committed to him. But Caserio did not just accept that fifth-year option as a formality. He sent a message with it. And what that message actually means for Stroud's future in Houston is where this story gets really interesting. But before we get into that like and subscribe button for more Texans and all the NFL content. Let's aim for 500 likes on this video. Nick Caserio stood in front of the media and said it without flinching. He said accepting the fifth-year option on CJ Stroud was more than a procedural thing. That one sentence changed the entire conversation around this quarterback, because it means the Houston Texans are not just keeping their options open, they are betting on him. And now Stroud has to answer that bet with the best football of his career. Last season, across 14 games, Stroud completed 64.5% of his passes, threw for 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Those numbers are not bad, but numbers never tell the full story. And here's the part that actually matters. The offense around him last year had no voice. Joe Mixon was gone. Stephon Diggs was in New England. Tank Dell never made it onto the field. When the defense got loud and started chirping, nobody on that offensive side of the ball barked back. The offense went quiet because its most important voices were absent. And when an offense goes quiet, the quarterback absorbs all of it. The doubt, the pressure, the whispers. Stroud carried all of that without the personality pieces that made him dangerous at Ohio State and dangerous in his first NFL season. Now walk into 2026. David Montgomery is in that backfield, and anyone who watched him in Detroit knows he does not come to work quietly. Wyatt Teller and Braden Smith bring a completely different energy to that offensive line. The voices are back. The attitude is different. And Stroud is playing this season with his entire financial future on the line. Because a strong year leads to an extension that pays him among the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. And a weak year reopens every question all over again. This is his prove-it moment. But the real story is not just whether Stroud can rise to it. It is what Nick Caserio is doing in the draft to make sure he never has to carry this offense alone again. Most NFL front offices say they take the best player available. Very few of them actually mean it. Nick Caserio does. And he laid out exactly how this Texans front office builds their draft board and it tells you everything about what they are planning to do over the next 4 days. Caserio described a process where players are graded vertically and horizontally across the board. 2 players graded similarly at different positions, the grade wins. A lower graded player at a position of need does not jump a higher graded player just because the need exists. He said it directly. There's no position this team will not consider drafting outside of quarterback. That is not a talking point. That is a philosophy that shapes every single pick. It means if a wide receiver is the best player on the board, when Houston selects at 28, Houston takes the wide receiver. If a cornerback grades out above everyone else available, that is the pick. The Texans are not going to force a selection because a fan base or a media narrative demands a certain position. What makes this even more interesting is how the Texans use information to build those grades. Assistant GM Chris Blanco confirmed the organization has embraced AI technology, not as a scouting tool, but as an efficiency tool. It helps them sort through data, sift reports, and work smarter without replacing the actual evaluation work their scouts and coaches do. It is the correct way to use it, because a grade built on bad information is still a bad grade, and a grade built on clean, organized, accurate data gives you a real edge when the board starts moving fast on draft night. The Texans have 8 picks entering this draft. They almost certainly will not leave with 8. Caserio loves to trade, and the board will create opportunities. The real question is which direction he moves and which specific positions have earned top grades on that board. Because one of them is a position most Texans fans did not see coming. Caserio was asked directly about the tight end room, and he did something that surprised people. He told the truth. He said there are questions if we are being real. That is a general manager standing at a podium and admitting his own roster has a real problem at a key position. And that kind of honesty means the Texans are actively hunting for answers in this draft class. Look at what they are working with behind Dalton Schultz. Brevin Jordan has suffered back-to-back season-ending injuries, and his status entering this offseason is listed as TBD. The Texans gave him back-to-back one-year deals, which tells you they believe in him, but cannot afford to depend on him. Foster Moreau was returning from injury himself last season. Cade Stover went down in the playoff game against New England. 3 of their 4 tight ends behind Schultz spent significant time hurt last year. That is not depth. That is a liability. Assistant GM James Lipford said the Texans view this tight end class as a high-quality group, and the depth behind the top names is genuinely strong. Joe Royer earned a top 30 visit with Houston. Eli Stowers stretches the seam in a way that creates problems for safeties. Michael Trigg brings receiving ability even though his combine testing drew some questions. The Texans do not need a round 1 tight end to solve this. The value in this class lives in rounds 2, 3, and 4, and that matches exactly how Caserio likes to build. Find the grade, trust the process, and fill the room with players who can compete. But while the tight end conversation was happening in that press conference, another position kept coming up, one that connects directly to CJ Stroud and what this offense needs to actually become dangerous. There is one name in this draft class that the Houston Texans are genuinely excited about, and most people outside of hardcore draft circles have no idea who he is. His name is Trey Zune, and if the Texans land him in round 3, it might be the best value pick of their entire draft weekend. Zune played at Texas A&M, started his career at tackle, and converted to center in 2025. He logged over 3,000 snaps across his college career, playing multiple positions along the offensive line. At the Senior Bowl, he stood out. He earned team captain honors. He checked every box Caserio openly values in draft prospects: senior, captain, elite athletic testing, and high-level performance in all-star settings. His pass blocking grade came in at 96.8, one of the highest marks recorded for any offensive lineman in this entire class. He benched 33 reps. His athletic score at center was 9.99. This is not a developmental project with upside on paper. This is a player with real production, real testing, and real versatility. The Texans brought him in for a top 30 visit. That matters. Houston's center situation behind Jake Andrews is the one open competition on the entire offensive depth chart, and Zoom does not need to win that battle on day one. He learns, he develops, and he could be the starting center for this franchise for the next 10 years. The Texans also brought in Texas A&M guard Chase Besantis for a top 30 visit, a round, 2 interior linemen with the strength and body quickness to develop into a starter, 2 Texas A&M offensive linemen, 2 top 30 visits. That is not a coincidence. But while the Texans are solving the trenches in this draft, there's a much louder conversation happening at the skill positions, and it involves a receiver room that is far more uncertain than most fans are willing to admit. Caserio was asked about Tank Dell at the pre-draft press conference, and his answer was honest in a way that should make Texans fans pay attention. He said it is day to day. He said they will have a better picture once they get through spring workouts. Tank has been present in rehab, running routes, doing the work. The clips look encouraging, but he missed an entire season of NFL football. And no amount of training footage changes what that means for availability and timing heading into 2026. That uncertainty opens a real conversation about this wide receiver room. Nico Collins is the clear number one, under contract through 2027, and he deserves to be treated like a genuine top receiver because his coverage numbers and contested catch ability are legitimate. But he ranked 30th in targets last season. 30th. That is not a Nico Collins problem. That is an offensive design problem that the new staff has to fix immediately. Jaden Higgins is entering his second year with real upside as a long-term piece. Jalen Noel had a quiet first year on limited snaps and has to prove he belongs on the field when the game is real. The depth beyond those names is thin. Caserio confirmed wide receiver is absolutely on the draft table. If the grade demands it in round 1, they will take it. The names circulating include Mekhi Lemon and Kenyon Sadiq, a tight end with wide receiver athleticism running a 4.3. The Texans have been connected to trade-up conversations, potentially packaging picks 28 and 38 to move up into the late teens. Houston has never had a true 3-receiver core in franchise history. Not with Andre Johnson. Not with DeAndre Hopkins. Never. This draft could be the moment they finally build one. But solving the receiver room is only half the battle, because somewhere in the background, a contract situation is developing that could shake this entire roster to its foundation. Nobody wants to talk about this yet. The draft is coming, the off-season energy is high, and everything feels like it is pointing forward. But in 2 years, the Houston Texans are going to face one of the hardest financial decisions any team in the NFL has faced in recent memory. And the window to prepare for it is right now. Kamari Lassiter and Kalen Bullock are both eligible for extensions next offseason. Lassiter is 23 years old. Bullock is 22. Both were Pro Bowl alternates after the 2025 season. Both are central pieces of a defense that finished number 1 in the NFL, and neither was drafted in the first round, which means no fifth-year option protection. When their current deals expire, both hit the open market with enormous leverage. The cornerback market just reset at $31 million per year when Trent McDuffie signed with the Rams. Lassiter is trending toward that conversation. The safety market is anchored by Kyle Hamilton at $25.1 million per year, and Bullock's coverage numbers, a 72.6 passer rating when targeted, 10 pass breakups, 4 interceptions, push him directly into that range. Layer in Will Anderson Jr. extension, which still has not been finalized. Layer in the projected CJ Stroud deal the following year. The Texans are staring at multiple massive contracts arriving at nearly the same time, and they cannot pay everyone. That is the reality. Lassiter brings physicality, tone setting, and run support that you rarely see from a corner. Bullock brings elite ball-hawking instincts and coverage. Both deserve to be paid. Not both can be. This is why the Texans have been quietly accumulating defensive back prospects in this draft class, building a replenishment system underneath, so that when the hard decision arrives, there is already someone ready to step into that secondary. And speaking of hard decisions, there is one more storyline from this offseason that most people dismiss too quickly, but it connects everything together. There's a name from Houston's past that has quietly resurfaced in this offseason conversation. Jadeveon Clowney, the former #1 overall pick who started his career as a Texan, has been discussed as a potential reunion target. Nobody is suggesting a massive deal. Nobody is suggesting he is a featured player. But as a rotational edge rusher behind Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter on a cheap 1-year contract, the fit makes real football sense. He brings experience, he brings pass rush ability off the bench, and he gives DeMeco Ryans a third option on 3rd and long that this defense does not currently have locked in. The Texans also already made one quiet move that deserves more credit. They traded for Marte Mapu from New England, a linebacker and safety hybrid who the Texans originally had a top 30 visit with back in the 2023 draft. He spent his first 2 seasons playing safety in New England, transitioned to linebacker in 2025, and now lands with DeMeco Ryans, one of the best linebacker developers in the business. Azeez Al-Shaair has publicly credited Ryans with making him the player he is. Fred Warner developed under him. If Ryans sees something in Mapu that is worth paying attention to, zoom all the way out. And here's what this Texans team actually is heading into 2026. A rebuilt offensive line with attitude. A quarterback with everything to prove. And finally, the pieces around him to prove it. A defense that was the best in football last year and added depth to stay there. A front office that drafts with discipline, moves with purpose, and builds without panic. The championship window is open right now. Nico Collins has 2 years left on his deal. Stroud is playing for his future. Lassiter and Bullock are approaching their biggest paydays. The Texans know all of this. And every pick they make this weekend is built around one goal: not competing, winning.